Well, what's up, folks? Here it is, Wednesday. We got about another day or so before Christmas Eve, and hopefully everyone will have a great holiday, of course. Tonight we have with us, once again, we thank him for coming back onto the show, Brandon Lee Gowton from Bleeding Green Nation. So we will get everything that's going on, whether it's the locker room or in the newsroom, whatever it may be. We'll be asking Brandon the questions. We also thank everyone for tuning in tonight. Of course, my co-host and sports contributor will be on momentarily. We also thank everyone who always views the show, especially come from last week when we did our first post-game show ever. So please feel free to leave any comments or any questions throughout the show, and we will get to them as best as we possibly can. So we thank everyone for tuning in here on a special episode on a Wednesday night, episode 23. So with all that being said, I'm Angel. This is Broad Street South Sports Talk. And of course, I can't do the show without my co-host himself, the deranged lunatic that is Mike Fuji. Mikey, how are you?
Pretty good. Deranged lunatic. That's a little harsh, don't you think?
Nah, it's because you're gonna get fired up. Believe me, I'm pretty sure tonight's another night where it'll be the continuation from the other night.
I'm pretty mellow today.
Well,
it's not game day. Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy holidays. Wednesday night edition tonight with BLG from Bleeding Green Nation.
And as, of course, the Sixers are playing their first game. Right now I'm looking at 56-55 Sixers, so hopefully the Sixers will start off with the win. They went perfect for the, of course, the preseason, I guess if you want to call it, but they went perfect, so let's hope that they win tonight. Of course, we can't also do the show without the Jewru himself, Michael Sherman. Mike, how are you?
Happy Wednesday, everyone. I am doing fantastic. I am officially on winter break, 11 days. Absolutely loving it. Happy holidays to all out there.
That is so true. I forget that you are on break. So, yeah, definitely a good occasion. And, of course, tonight we thank the man again for coming on with us for a second time. It is Brandon Lee Gowton, the man himself. Brandon, how are you? Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you guys as well. Merry Christmas, all that good stuff. Thanks for having me on the show. Glad to be back.
Thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
You're welcome. I see the comments coming in, so we're going to get the comments here shortly. So, Brandon, of course, you know that as you report every single week from Bleeding Green Nation, of course, the silent reporter for the Eagles. And, you know, we've seen as the season has progressed, it's ups, it's downs. Now Jalen Hurts starts. So, again, we go through the ups and downs. And the ups and downs also were a contribution of Dallas Goedert, who should have caught the ball in the end zone on that Hail Mary pass that the Eagles could have came back and won. So my first question to you is, how did you feel with Dallas Goedert just standing there and basically lifeless instead of actually reaching out for the ball?
In fairness to him, I think, this is deep into the game. I think that play looked a little worse than it really was, just because, they had just done a Hail Mary attempt. And I think he's probably just more exhausted than we probably realize or give it credit for, not being in that situation. I get that it didn't look great. I can't kill him for it. I think it looked worse than it really was.
No. I know he played a good game, and don't get me wrong, Jalen Hurts did as well. I think Jalen, the only thing that I saw within Jalen Hurts, a little kind of Carson-esque, it was holding on to the ball just a little bit too long. But again, he's learning as he goes. The O-line tend to look a little bit better. I'm not going to say they were leaps and bounds a lot better than when Carson was in, but they tend to at least look a little more, I don't know, I guess diligent would be kind of somewhat the word to use for them. But either way, at least there looks like there's somewhat life in this team. And I know Mike has a question as far as what the remainder of the season is going to be like. So I'm going to let Mike take that one away.
Brandon, as far as Carson Wentz, do you believe he will be here next season?
That's the $1 or $120 million question, depending on how you look at it. The contract is obviously not easy for the Eagles to move on from. I think it is not impossible. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's not easy. So when you look at that, it's hard for me to say it's likely that he's not back. But I just think when you take the contract away for a second and you kind of just look at how things are going for this team, and the relationship between Carson Wentz and the Eagles at this point. And I think it might just be damaged beyond repair. And I think it could be time for the Eagles to just turn the page on Carson Wentz. I know it's a big thing to say, but I just don't know if there's really a path to him being successful here in Philly. I think he might be able to be salvageable elsewhere, but I really don't know that moving forward, the Eagles can fix him and count on him to be their franchise guy. And I think with the way Jalen Hurts is playing here down the stretch, I think this is becoming more and more his team. And I don't know how you kind of go back to Carson Wentz if that's the case. If Jalen Hurts kind of continues to prove that, he's showing potential, he's looking good, and that the team is playing hard around him and a lot more functional and better than they were with Carson Wentz. So to me, I think it's reached the point where ideally you would love to have Carson Wentz back and Jalen Hurts in a quarterback competition and have him battle it out. But I don't think Carson wants any part of that. It seems like, based on the reporting we're hearing from ESPN, like he doesn't want to be a backup. And that means, if he's in a competition, there's a chance he will be. So I just don't think, I don't think Carson Wentz is back next year.
According to Rob Motti, he said that Carson Wentz, the rumors with all the Adam Schefter stuff coming out, he said that Carson Wentz never did come out and say he wanted to be traded. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to, dispute anything Rob says. I believe, you heard that. But I think it doesn't have to be Carson Wentz directly, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be his agent for Carson Wentz's sentiment to get out there. There's such a thing that we refer to as like camps, like Carson Wentz's camp. People around Carson Wentz. It could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be whatever. It could be an agent. That although Schefter went on 97.5 and said it wasn't an agent or Carson Wentz himself, but I still think that report gets out there from someone from Carson Wentz's side of things, because I don't think that report benefits the Eagles. I think that report hurts the Eagles in terms of trade leverage. So I don't know why the Eagles would be putting that out there. I think it's someone from Carson Wentz's side. So yeah, it might not have been Carson Wentz himself, but that doesn't mean he didn't sign off on it or he didn't know it was going to come out. So I would just, I would be careful to put that context there.
Would you say there is animosity within the locker room with Carson Wentz, like the stuff that's been flying around for the last couple of years?
I don't know animosity, at least in terms of players, how they feel about him and whatnot. Although, there have been issues in the past of, back when Nick Foles was here, especially in his final season, 2018, there were factions, I think, in the locker room. There was a locker room divided. So I think that's absolutely potentially could be happening again here. Jalen Hurts continues to play well, and people are kind of rallying around him and wanting to see him as the quarterback, especially if it continues to trend this way. I think there could be, I don't know if animosity is the right word, but there's definitely a disconnect between Carson Wentz and the team, the front office and whatnot here. Carson Wentz, I think, clearly wants to be the starter. I think he had every reason to believe he was going to be the starter for a long time. He signs that contract, but they bring Jalen Hurts in and he gets benched. And now it seems like just the relationship between him and the team, because apparently, he kind of received reassurances that, he'd be the guy, but he's not the guy right now. And I think he's in jeopardy of being the guy moving forward.
Would you say the hiring of John Dorsey this past weekend is something big to come in the offseason with Howie Roseman?
I'm interested in that because, apparently he's actually been working for the team I saw since before the draft this year. So now the Eagles have worked with consultants in the past and haven't necessarily hired them full time. So it could be just that's what's going to happen here with John Dorsey, where they don't really hire him into a full-time role. He's just consulting for a while. Maybe it's a general manager job elsewhere. But it sounded like, based on what NFL Network had to say, that Dorsey could see a full-time role, like a promotion here. And I think that would be concerning to me because I think Howie Roseman needs to go. And I think hiring Dorsey is just kind of a half measure that actually doesn't really solve anything. People want to say, like, you just move Howie over to the cap side and have Dorsey do the drafting. Well, I mean, Howie Roseman's still going to have final say, first of all. And second of all, Howie Roseman has done a bad job with the cap. They're over $70 million. They're $70 million over the cap next year. And he's handed out some of the worst contracts in the NFL. So he's not a good cap guy. We need to stop saying that because that's just not true anymore.
Who would you say you see is coming back next year as far as guys like Fletcher Cox, Lane Johnson, like the big Zach Ertz?
Yeah, I mean, they're stuck, with a lot of those guys in terms of the money's already on the books and they can't just get rid of all of them. I think Ertz is a prime candidate to be traded. He should be traded. I think that's where you're really getting the most value for him at this point. And also potentially you might want to extend Dallas Goedert, which the Eagles can do as soon as after this year and kind of commit to him as their long-term tight end. So, yeah, I mean, some of those bets are going to be gone. Need to be gone. Alshon Jeffrey should be gone. Deshaun Jackson's going to be gone. There's obvious moves they're going to have to make, really, just to get under the cap. But some of those other guys, like a Fletcher Cox, who I think is still playing well, to be clear, too. It's not like they should be cutting him, but they also redid his deal during the season this year. So they extended their commitment to him even further in the future. And when you look at it, a website called Over the Cap did a study earlier this year, and the Eagles actually have the least flexible roster in the NFL. So that's the discouraging thing about this year. For as bad as the team has been, it's not like they can really make sweeping changes in the offseason. A lot of this roster is locked into next year.
Would you say PEDs have caught up to Lane Johnson with all these injuries over the last couple of years?
I don't know if that's it, but I think the biggest issue with Lane is he never got fully healthy. He even talked about as much earlier this year when he originally suffered the ankle injury that's been bothering him for years now, back in October 2018. So more than 2 years ago. And it sounds like he had never kind of fully healed. And obviously Lane is a tough player. He's going to play through injury. It sounded like Lane had thought he was finally over it this summer, but that clearly wasn't the case because it was an issue during the season. I don't mean to get gross, but he had to have it drained multiple times throughout the year. Yeah, that's not great. So, I just think he kind of never got healthy, and hopefully now he is. But when Lane Johnson talked to reporters for the final time this season, right before he went on injured reserve, he didn't necessarily downplay the idea that this could be an issue for the considerable future that could linger for him. So that's pretty concerning.
No, for me, before I get on to the next one here, of course, the next segment coming up is brought to you by Last Out Media. We hope that it's not the last time out for Zach Ertz, but if it is, he can always become a better podcaster, or he can become a podcaster. If you want to become a better podcaster, by all means, reach out to lastoutmedia.com, where they will teach you all the ropes and even give you coaching classes on how to become a better podcaster. So with that being said, with Zach Ertz, it kind of makes me think then, have we been seeing then a lot more repetition as far as for Dallas Goedert, because the Eagles are trying to save, I guess a trade bait for Zach Ertz, meaning that obviously if they're injured or they're plagued by an injury, especially this late in the season, and if they're looking on trading him, is that kind of one of the reasons why Dallas Goedert is getting more reps than Zach?
I think it's just because Goddard's the better player, at this point. And, Ertz has not had a good season. Obviously he had a better game this past week against the Cardinals, made some big plays. He got open. But yeah, I think Goedert is just, he should be the guy moving forward. He's younger, you're going to be able to sign him to a deal as soon as this offseason. I think he's just overtaken Ertz because he's been the better player, but Ertz is still a big part of this offense for now. And yeah, I mean, it makes total sense to me to trade him. You have to get younger. You can get an asset for him. I don't know exactly what, because he's coming off this down year and he wants to get paid even more. Or get a new deal here. So I don't know what his value is exactly, but I do think it is time to move on from Zach Ertz this offseason.
As far as Jalen Reagor, because I'm kind of curious here, Brandon. I know the Eagles could have gone 30 million different ways, just like any other NFL team. Is there a bigger upside to Jalen Reagor than what we had heard coming out, of course, the combine and him coming out of college?
Yeah, it's weird because I think Reagor's kind of had a rookie season that's left me wanting more. I think anyone would say that, but even when he has these flashes, I'm still just I want to see more. I want to see more out of this, and especially when you're seeing all these other rookies thrive elsewhere. I mean, obviously Justin Jefferson has been amazing. A bunch of other rookies have been great this year, and when you look at all those guys and you look at what Reagor is doing, it's just it's really not anything super special to me. It's some nice flashes. I think we've seen enough from him to think, he belongs in the NFL. He can be a solid kind of player, but is he going to be a real difference maker? I mean, I just don't think we've seen that kind of potential yet. And look, he's 21. He's really young. It's his first year. I am by no means saying the book has been written on his career, but I think he could have reasonably had a better rookie season, a more encouraging rookie season.
Right. I know Rick has a question we were talking about, and I missed this earlier. But Rick says, I can see Wentz with the Patriots since Belichick knows how to change players for the better. Now, again, you'd have to give up, I guess, a lot for Carson Wentz. And not only that, but you're talking about an absorption of a contract. So that would make it interesting on how in the world the Eagles would be able to even alleviate all that money, yet alone still, I mean, they'll end up getting a hit either way, whichever way you look at it. But it'd be interesting to see if someone like Brian, for Belichick to take him on, because I don't think Cam Newton comes back to New England next year. That's just me. Me personally, I will say it's nice that New England is not there this year because I think they've had the run in the mill for the longest. So it's nice to see a change as far as the AFC East, especially up in the North. But again, it comes down to, and I feel kind of bad, and I said this kind of earlier this week, that Carson is getting, I guess, such a bum rap, I guess, in the city. I know he does a lot with his AO1 Foundation. I know he does a lot within the community. So that kind of leads me to believe as well that maybe if the Eagles decide to keep him around, would it be because obviously the work he's doing in the community, or is it one of those things as well that they know that maybe he would continue it almost like Malcolm Jenkins, but more on, I guess, on an off-season approach?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make it personal here about Carson Wentz, but I think I think the biggest thing when it comes to Wentz and the Eagles potentially needing to move on is that there's this idea that you just hire a new head coach and that could fix everything. Well, first of all, Doug Pederson is 11-3. Would have been 12-2 if Dallas Goedert makes a catch at the end of the game, or not even just that final drive, but the drive before where the ball was in his hands. So, point being though, Pederson has had success without Carson Wentz, and I think that's relevant. And I think it's so hard to look at how the offense is having their best game of the year. The Eagles they're coming off back-to-back weeks of over 400 yards for the first time this season, late in the season with Jalen Hurts starting. And I think it's hard to look at that and feel great about Carson Wentz. And I think one of the issues in thinking that a new head coach can fix him is there have been real concerns about Carson Wentz being coachable. And when I kind of look at the report that has come out and everything, it makes me feel like Carson Wentz isn't necessarily reflecting and looking at himself as the problem here. I think the Eagles have failed Carson Wentz in a number of ways in terms of not being great with player personnel and whatnot. But I also think Carson Wentz has failed himself here. So I think that's all part of the calculus. Now, Carson Wentz does great work off the field. Yeah, that's all great. But I mean, if the on-field results aren't there, I mean, that's the driving factor there.
As tumultuous as this season has been for the Eagles, with 2 games to go, they're in a spot where they can actually still make the playoffs, which is unfathomable to me. A lot of people in Philadelphia have talked about just tank the season, play for the draft pick. Dare I say it, should we be rooting for the Dallas Cowboys this weekend to beat the Philadelphia Eagles?
I think it's hard not to look at this like objectively. Take the emotion out of it. Take the Cowboys. You hate the Cowboys side out of it. I think objectively, it is best for the Eagles to lose out and get a high draft pick as possible in the long term. I think that would best serve them over the long term. Now, with that said, I think with Jalen Hurts showing potential here, I think there's value in getting more of a sample size of him, like getting into the playoffs, get an extra game, at least one extra game to see him further and see how he does, get some playoff experience under his belt. If he's going to be your long-term starting quarterback, there's value in that. So I think you can kind of sell it either way. I'm enjoying watching this team. So I'm kind of on the side now where emotionally I would say I would see him win. It's more fun. But objectively, like putting my mind and taking my heart out of it, putting my mind on it, I think losing was beneficial to the team in the long term.
Okay. Yeah. Joey B, and just to kind of give you a rundown here, Brandon, Joey B is from Colorado, and he's got usually pretty good one-liners. Of course, he has one here where he says, "I wish I can grow a mustache like you."
Well, thank you, Joey B.
Joey B. We heard that Josh Sweat is going to be apparently he he's going to be out for at least another game. What's the update, at least with Josh Sweat, and what injury are we looking at that obviously is making him not play come this week?
Yeah, so he was previously dealing with a shoulder issue that he came up in the Saints game, but then a wrist injury now is what's holding him back and going to miss this week's game for certain. And I mean, there's only one more game left in the regular season, of course, so might not be back at all. Doug Pederson has used the term miss some time this year to describe players, and those players have usually like missed a significant amount of time, not just like one game, like multiple games. So I think it's possible that we see Josh Sweat go on IR here, because he might just not be ready to come back this season. We'll see. But I'm not expecting him back in the regular season. Maybe the first playoff game if they made it at most. Like that's the best case scenario. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Sorry, Mike, I'm going to squeeze one more in here before you get to yours here. The one question that was asked was also, is it finally time to move on from Alshon and D-Jax? From what I heard apparently this week as well is that supposedly, again, Deshaun Jackson will not be an Eagle come next season.
Yeah, I mean, they have to, basically, just to get under the cap. And I mean, Deshaun has played like something like 10% of the snaps possible since the Eagles reacquired him in March 2019. So, I mean, and he's 4 now. You just start lying. And then Alshon, he was his most useful game in forever against the Cardinals. But, again, the money he's making doesn't come close to justifying his spot on the team. So, yeah, easy decision, move on from those guys after the season.
Brandon, would you say Doug Pederson's coaching his last 2 games as the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles?
Possibly, yeah, because I think not deservedly so, to be clear. I don't think Doug Pederson should be fired at this point. I really don't, just because you look at how all of a sudden the offense looks better and more threatening when the quarterback isn't really dragging it down. And I think the quarterback has been a bigger problem than the head coach this year. Now, with that said, I think this organization could potentially scapegoat Doug, and I think there's a part of Doug that knows that and also wouldn't mind being fired. Now, I don't think he prefers to be fired, to be clear, but I think it would almost be a release and a relief for him because Doug Pederson got a lot of the blame for what has gone on with the Eagles, a disproportionate amount, I would say. And I think it's possible that the organization tries to scapegoat him. And it's a shame, again, because Howard Roseman isn't getting criticism. I think Carson Wentz avoided too much criticism, although he's getting more now. I think people are seeing that he was a bigger problem than maybe was realized earlier on. People wanted to blame it all on Doug. So, yeah, I think it's possible just because the writing might already be on the wall for him and the team, might look to fire him. But, that could change, of course, if they win these final 2 games and they get into the playoffs. Then I think it's pretty hard to fire your only Super Bowl winning head coach. And to be clear here, too, I don't even think they're going to fire him. I think it would kind of be sold, as a parting of ways, mutual parting of the ways. So we'll see about that. But, yeah, I think it would be sad if Doug Pederson's time is coming to an end here. But I think there's a decent chance it could be.
Do you think the problem is with the Eagles' offense is when the Eagles brought in Rich Scangarello and Marty Morningwig, and now with the rumor about Press Taylor calling plays, do you think this could have affected Carson mentally? Like just too many cooks in the kitchen?
I think it's a fair I think it's a fair point. I think it's a fair question to wonder. Why not just hire a real offensive coordinator? And why do this system where there's all these different guys? Yeah. I don't see the need to reinvent the wheel here and overcomplicate things. Now, I don't want to say that's like the only reason or even one of the very top reasons he's struggling this year. I think Carson Wentz owns a lot of the blame for his own struggles, but that's like another factor in there that might not be helping him.
Would you say you could see Deuce Staley possibly becoming the offensive coordinator or possibly getting a head coaching job somewhere in the NFL?
I don't think he's going to be an offensive coordinator just because the Eagles really haven't shown an inclination. They didn't even interview him last year when they had the opening. So I would be surprised if all of a sudden they put him in that role. I think Deuce Staley should absolutely be a head coach somewhere. I think teams should be interviewing him this offseason and giving him a chance. I think Deuce Staley is really impressive when you hear him talk, when we get to interact with him and the limited opportunities we do in the media. I think he's really impressive, and I think some team needs to give him a chance.
I agree. I think Deuce is ready for the next step to at least be offensive coordinator. I mean, the players love him, which speaks volumes.
Absolutely. I think another team would do well to hire him, and I think he's really ready to lead a team. I don't know specifically, what he brings schematically because we haven't seen it,
right.
But I think as a leader of men, I think he's definitely a great candidate for a team to hire.
I think he's paid his dues.
I think so. There's a comment here I'm gonna put up here in a second with Ryan Neff, but kind of piggyback on what Mike said. I think if I'm Doug Pederson, and I understand, someone has to be a scapegoat, just like you said, Brandon, and it's tough. It's tough because you're put in that situation. The bad part for me is that you're looking at a 2-year separation from the Super Bowl. I guess 3 years if you count, obviously, this February. I don't know if to me, like, I know this is the one and only Super Bowl this team has ever had. And then, like, 2 years later, I'm being shown the door. And it's kind of one of those things, like, does it follow it with you on the next team? And let's say, like, the Houston Texans decide to pick up, which could be a possibility if they let Doug go. Do you, as the head coach, do you carry that with you, like, that weight? Like, it was just 2 years ago. I put it all together. And then 2 years later, this thing just didn't go well. So, me personally, originally I said, yeah, sure. Should Doug go? Yes. I think Doug is kind of now turning it a little bit around for himself. And supposedly there was a report out saying that Doug himself stated that he does not want to leave from Philadelphia. So then what would it take for these final 2 games, I guess, for Doug to make his mark, for Jeffrey Lurie to say, all right, Doug, you're in. And we all know that Howie won't be out, but Doug, you're in, Howie's out.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything, unfortunately, that could be done to convince Jeffrey Lurie that Howie Roseman should be gone. Maybe ever, unfortunately. I mean, it's at the point where, we're hearing inquire that Jeffrey Lurie has been considered moving on from Howie Roseman, which is insane, given how things are going and given how bad of a roster he's built and expensive of a roster he's built, and how the Eagles haven't drafted a Pro Bowl player since 2014, I should say. They've only drafted 1 Pro Bowl player, and that's Carson Wentz. It's currently this team's backup quarterback on the bench. So, and it's not like there's these young guys on the rise who you think can be like stars, like really big difference makers for this team. Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders are nice players, but I don't know that they're changing the landscape of this team. So, point being, I think Howie Roseman deserves a lot more blame. As for what Doug Pederson can do, I mean, I think it's pretty hard to, if the Eagles somehow find a way to get into the playoffs, even albeit at 6-9-1, I think it's pretty hard to sell the fan base on the idea that, that they're going to move on from Doug Pederson, Super Bowl winning head coach. Literally a statue of him outside the stadium, him and Nick Foles, and then neither of them being here anymore. Just a couple of years after they win the Super Bowl. So, I think if Doug's definitely back, I would think if they do make the playoffs, anything short of that, they might just try to sell it as it wasn't good enough and he needs to go.
The comment here from Ryan Neff was that the 5-year plan with Wentz is complete. I've said this before. When Reich left, Wentz had a shot. Reich knew how to handle and talk to Carson. Doug didn't. Reich put Carson in positions to succeed. Doug is clueless on that front. His injury had nothing to do with it, and that's where Sherman and I disagree. Which is that. It's interesting. I mean, I don't even know what to say truthfully at this point, because I guess some other front office personnel could probably end up going as well, maybe with Doug, but when Jeffrey Lurie, I would like for someone to actually take ownership, for like Jeffrey Lurie to come down and say, all right, here's how this, and this is going to happen, and be stern. But the loyalty part of Jeffrey Lurie with Howie Roseman, it's so ridiculous at this point. I mean, is it going to take hypothetically 2021, there is an actual preseason where the fans can fill up the stadium. There is an actual season when the fans can come back. Is it going to take to the point where when Chip Kelly, we saw his last days were numbered, the last 3 games, because the fans weren't coming up, and that hit Jeffrey's pockets. So is it going to have to be something to that extreme that the fans are not going to show up? the TV ratings locally start going down because the fans are just growing tired of Harry Roseman? Because I don't see any major splashes from him this offseason.
I mean, they're not. They can't do anything. Like they can't make splashes. Like they don't. They don't have the resources to really do that. Yeah, I think that the dangerous thing about bringing Howie Roseman back too is that he knows he's on the hot seat, or at least in theory, he should be at this point. Even though we're hearing that he isn't, but I think looking forward, he would kind of feel like he might be just because of how the team is trending down. And if that's the case, then it feels like he's going to be incentivized to make moves that help the team in the short term. But I think that's bad because I don't think the Eagles can be afforded to be thinking that way, because where they are, like, they're kind of shot, I think, for 2021, unfortunately. Now, maybe they can make the playoffs in a weak NFC East, who knows, but they're not going to be a real title contender next year because they're locked into the same roster. And I just think that, their ceiling is capped here. And I think the Eagles should kind of be making moves geared towards the future and building this thing for the long term as opposed to the short term. But why would you trust Howie Roseman to do that? And why would you have confidence he can do that when he's put the team in the situation they're in? If Howie Roseman had the answers, the Eagles wouldn't be in this situation. Unfortunately, correct. Jeffrey Lurie doesn't see it the same way.
So Rick asked a good question here. Rick Mark is a great friend of the show. We thank Rick and everyone else. Of course, Joey, Michelle, by the way, Merry Christmas. Before I forget, a couple of people, Casey Courts talked about that you look like Carson Wentz with glasses on, so that's a good compliment. And Teddy says, Merry Christmas. But Rick says that Brian Dawkins for defensive coordinator, Schwartz out. The only problem is, from what I understand at least, and what I gathered from it seemed like Derek Gunn, is that I guess right now, Brian Dawkins, at least I do believe, is that he doesn't want to have any kind of role, I guess, in the NFL. I don't know if things have changed, but how would you feel if, let's just say, everything being 2020, I guess, if Brian Dawkins became a defensive coordinator, and would the Eagles be the first ones to actually jump on him?
Yeah, I think it's just the time commitment. Like coaching it's like a big time suck, basically. Like I don't think Dawkins wants to do that. He's put the work in. He was working with the team, right, back when they won the Super Bowl as an executive, and he kind of would do some coaching like after practice and whatnot, kind of work with the players. And clearly he got a taste of that, and it wasn't for him. So yeah, I just can't see it happening.
Well, I remember I saw an interview with B. Dawk, and he's happy doing his motivational speaking. Plus, I think his son is just about to graduate college and possibly might get drafted in the NFL. So
yeah, it's a factor.
Yeah, there's of course we knew this week as well. We have I know Brandon Graham got his first nod for the Pro Bowl. Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox, if I remember correctly, the third Pro Bowler. So there's a clip that I want to show here about Schwartz talking about how Brandon felt, and I know Doug Pederson with the interview he had. I think I'm almost certain it was today. He said too that he was that Brandon Graham was really happy. He was the one that broke the news to him, and he think with Brandon being so excited, he didn't have time, I guess, to express his thank yous to Doug. But it is nice that Brandon Graham at least made the Pro Bowl, and I think we're actually almost 2 years shy as well that we thought that Brandon should have been here, but he's made a huge turnaround. So before I get to the clip, and I want to ask Brandon, and for those who are just joining us, we have Brandon Lee Gowton from Bleeding Green Nation. So follow him on Twitter. By the way, your podcast, I will say, if anyone wants to be well informed, and I'm going to say this real clear, if anyone wants to be well informed, catch up with his podcast. And now, if you're traveling in the holidays, put those headphones on, listen to it on the aircraft, in your car, whatever it is, and you will get caught up even if you didn't follow the Eagles from the beginning, from the start of the season, you will get caught up, and it's every interesting podcast that I've ever heard from anybody. You and Derek Gunn, I will say, is probably right up there with the top two. So I thank you for that. But when it comes to the Pro Bowl, and we know we've seen it as years have gone past now, that it's become less and less interesting. Of course, they moved it now from Orlando. I think now they're going to play it in the new Rams Stadium, if I remember correctly, or Levi Stadium, one or two. Well, maybe they'll have to relocate again because apparently in California you can't do anything. Who knows until February? But I'm wondering if has the thrill gone, or is it even worth being a Pro Bowl player anymore, Brandon?
Yeah, it's a big deal for Brandon Graham. I mean, it's not just about. I mean, no one. I don't think people. It's not about playing in the game. It's about just the honor, the recognition. I know specifically Brandon Graham has talked about within the Eagles facility. There's a big wall, kind of like the wall I have behind me here, but just like a banner across the wall of all the Pro Bowl players, like basically like a fathead version of them, where it's this big blown up version of them, and every Eagles Pro Bowl player is on there. And, for Brandon Graham to be an all-time Eagle like he is, and beyond that, really just a great guy by all accounts off the field, a great family man. Yeah, he's a great family that, he posts all the time on social media, and they were so happy for him, and it was great to see that. Brandon Graham is an all-time Eagle. That's really what I define him as. He made the biggest play in Eagles franchise history when he strip sacked Tom Brady to help them win the Super Bowl. He's been a great player. His story is awesome. He overcame all the idea that he was a bust to become this franchise legend in Eagles, a future Eagles Hall of Famer, a member of the Eagles Hall of Fame. He'll be one day. I couldn't be more happy for Brandon Graham. He deserves this. He puts the work in. He showed up. Even, for as bad as the team has been this year, that's a guy who showed up every week. I know he hasn't had a sack in a while, but he's bringing the maximum effort every single snap. And it's interesting because he says he wants to play 15 years. He's on year 11. So hopefully, maybe he can be a piece for this team still for years to come. I always want to see Brandon Graham playing for the Eagles. He's great.
No. I'll get back to it. I'm going to show the clip here about Schwartz and talking about the upcoming, obviously, game and then Brandon Graham. But it reminds me, too, of an actual quarterback who's down here who also wants to play a couple of years. So we'll get to that after the clip here.
Way to go, BG!
Man, there were some tears shed in the coaching staff rooms last night. Just a totally deserving guy. He's had a long career and he's been a very good player for a long time. But to get his first Pro Bowl nod, it sort of choked everybody up because we know what kind of guy. I mean, you guys know what kind of guy he is. I think the fans know what kind of guy he is. He's persevered through some tough times early in his career. He's battled some injuries. He's an incredibly hard worker. He plays with a lot of spirit. All the things that you respect about a player Brandon Graham personifies. His communication was outstanding. He had a bad play in the game. Gave up a short completion and then missed a tackle, and it was a big play. But I think a lot of the rest of the stuff sort of goes unsung with a player like that. He was working really hard during the game, sort of hand in hand with me to give me, my eyes on the field, my ears on the field. Jay is outstanding on the sideline. I mean, he's intense, he's competitive, he is always positive.
Jake became the punter. I thought Jake did a really good job of handling that situation. He punted the ball well. I thought the guys covered well for him. And everybody kind of stepped up their game down the stretch there for us. Really, there's a lot of moving parts. Richard Rodgers went out of the game early on. Richard was a wing, so then Zach on field goal. So then Zach had to go in and become the wing on field goal. And then when Zach became the holder, then we had to get Toth in as a wing on field goal and move Zach to the holder. So there's a lot of moving parts anytime that stuff goes down. I thought those guys handled it well. Obviously, we practiced that stuff.
Now, of course, speaking of it as well, and I completely forgot as they were talking about, obviously, Zach Ertz coming in as a holder, that trick, fourth down, fake punt pass, did not see it coming whatsoever from Arizona. And I thought it was probably one of the neatest things I've seen so far this season, because who would have thought the punter went back? I mean, he sold it for sure. And then the pass was perfect, so kudos to the Cardinals for that one. But as far as the other play, of course, Tom Brady being down here with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and supposedly he says, of course, he got a 2-year deal with the Bucs. He says he wants to play until he's 45 years old. Now, of course, he's 42 years old. According to the head coach, Bruce Arians, he said as long as his legs are good and don't give out, he couldn't see why he plays for another 2 years. Now, again, is the hidden message saying Sure, Tom can play, but maybe not with us for the next 3 years. Because right now, the backup quarterbacks that Tampa has, unless they draft well come next season, Tom Brady could be here for at least an additional 2 seasons, at least till he's 44 years old. But it's to me, it's amazing that. I mean, of course, we have I won't say hatred personally, but just the hatred because of what ended up happening with New England many years ago when Donald was around. But we got a redemption, so that's a good thing. Fuji, you had a question?
Now, I was going to touch on. Oh, yes, I do. Excuse me. I was going to touch on with Brandon. One of the brighter spots of this defense this year, which you don't really hear about, is Alex Singleton. Seems like he's been playing lights out, a good part of the season. If I'm correct, he came from the Canadian Football League, right? As a free agent?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, the Eagles signed him, I believe, what was it, 2019, early on. I believe so, yeah. And, he was on the practice squad last year. He got called up to the roster, really only played on special teams. And then this year he's had a chance to play on defense. And yeah, it looks like a guy who can kind of stick around here. Now, I think there have been issues in coverage with Alex Singleton. That's kind of an issue. He's not a perfect starter by any means, but he's such a good tackler. Obviously he's racked up these huge tackle numbers. And overall, he's given the Eagles an upgrade at linebacker, certainly from what they had. He's been better than Nate Gary. I think, everyone can say that. So, finding him has helped solidify the defense. And, he can actually maybe be a starter for this team.
I think Nate Gary's in his last couple games as an Eagle.
Yeah, he's going to be a free agent after this year. And, maybe they re-sign him to, cheap 1-year deal. But, I can't see more than that.
Do you have a list of the Eagles' unrestricted free agents who you think may be back next season? If you were off the top of your head.
Well, I know just because they're locked in to so many guys already. It's not like there's going to be this kind of massive turnover here, but pulling it up on overthecap.com. And it's Jason Peters, who should obviously be done, should retire, should not be back. It's like Jalen Mills, who it's Jalen Mills, who the team probably will look to re-sign, especially if Jim Schwartz is still the defensive coordinator. Nickel Roby-Coleman, was on a 1-year deal. He came in. I think the Eagles kind of need to upgrade there at their slot corner spot. But then it's, like smaller name guys like Vinny Curry, Hassan Ridgeway, Richard Rodgers, Crayvon LeBlanc, Duke Riley, who's actually, starting at linebacker next to Alex Singleton, playing the second most amount of snaps there at the position. So maybe they look to re-sign him. But other than that, it's kind of these bottom of the roster guys. It's not these really big name players.
You see Malik Jackson coming back next season, or is he on the?
Yeah, I don't think they can. The Eagles are going to have to free up money this offseason. They're going to have to make moves to do that, and I really don't understand how you can afford to have that luxury of a third, high-paid defensive tackle. Also, not to say Malik Jackson has been bad, or terrible all season long or anything, but he has, I think, 0 sacks and 1 quarterback hit since week 6. So that's not great. And what the Eagles can do with him after the season is they can designate him as a post-June 1 cut, and they would free up $10 million in cap space. So I think they're going to have to do that.
Can you see Brandon Graham taking a pay cut next year?
I would hope he wouldn't have to, coming off a Pro Bowl year here. I can't. Maybe they do something to. Honestly, they could probably sign him to an extension if they wanted to. If they wanted to add another year or 2 onto his contract, and I think for as much as the Eagles shouldn't be doing that in general with older players, I think he can kind of be the exception to the rule, being such a reliable producer here. And being such a good culture guy, I think if you're going to do that with him, you could kind of extend him because it would lower his cap hit, which goes up to $17.9 million in 2021. So they can probably do something to bring that number down or restructure his deal somehow. But yeah, I don't think it'll be a pay cut as much as they just move the money around somehow.
Why is it the last 2 seasons the Eagles have signed L.J. Ford last year, and towards the middle of the season they let him go? And the same thing was with Will Parks this year. He goes back to Denver, has a couple good games, and it's like Will Parks never really even got a chance coming off that IR injury. Can you explain that?
It's a great question. I think it's just a disconnect, between the front office, who clearly likes these players, and for whatever reason, the coaching staff hasn't been super inclined to play them. Now, I still don't think that gives the front office. I don't think it washes their hands clean when they cut them and they go on to have success elsewhere, because I think the front office should be willing to keep those players around in the case of injury, which, by the way, the Eagles just had this year with Rodney McLeod going down. And it could have been nice to have Will Parks still on the team. And then even last year, I remember when LJ Fort got cut, it was early on in the season, and then the Eagles, Nigel Bradham got hurt, and then they cut Zach Brown. So, they didn't really have to rush to cut him just because the coaching staff wasn't playing him. There's still value in having him around as a backup and in case there's an injury. And then maybe it turns into an Alex Singleton type situation this year, where Gary was the guy, but he got hurt. And then Singleton has come in and played well. So sometimes it just takes an injury for the coaching staff to, have to force the player in there. And then they see, oh, I can trust this guy. So I still think the front office deserves some blame for cutting him too soon. But clearly, just like the defensive coaching staff and the front office aren't totally on the same page there.
Why is it you get guys like Rasul Douglas, who went to Carolina, Sidney Jones, who's probably playing really good for Jacksonville? Why is it that the Eagles just seem like they can't develop talent? I mean, these guys go somewhere else, they flourish. Can you explain that or put your finger on it?
I would push back on that a little bit. I know we've seen numbers and stuff earlier on in the season that Rasul Douglas and Sidney Jones were having success. I think Rasul has largely been the same player he was here. That's what Rasul was. He was an up and down kind of guy. He had some highs, but he also had some lows. And watching him in the limited times I've been able to this year, I'm still seeing him get beat. I saw Justin Jefferson roast him a couple of times. I saw, I think when they played Denver recently, the rookie wide receiver there from Penn State, he was roasting Rasul Douglas for multiple touchdowns. So I think it's gotten a little too much hype that those guys are thriving elsewhere. I don't think that's truly the case. And with Sidney Jones, I mean, one of the biggest issues with him has been he can't stay healthy. And guess what? I think he's missed 4 of the last 5 games or so. So okay, so you wanted to keep him around, but he still can't be available because he's going to get hurt all the time. And he didn't. A big reason why the Eagles cut him this year is because he was barely healthy for training camp. So it's hard for me to totally begrudge them for moving on from those guys when I still think there are issues there. And also, though, to criticize the front office again, I mean, they kept Alshon Jeffrey on the roster when they could have put him on the PUP list, and they could have kept one of those guys around. So I think, the front office still deserves blame in there. I don't think you can only say this is coaching staff and they didn't develop those guys properly. I think that can be a factor in there. I don't think it's a totally invalid point, but I just think people got a little too carried away with that in terms of Rasul Douglas and Sidney Jones are absolutely stars all of a sudden. I don't agree with that at all.
Sherman, you had a question?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the question about the Wentz versus Jalen Hurts. We can essentially say that these 4 weeks is essentially an audition for Jalen Hurts to see if he's going to be able to hack it in this league. Let's just say going into the offseason, Eagles management decides we're going to keep Carson Wentz. He's going to be the man, and we're going to decide to move on from Jalen Hurts. What type of trade value would Jalen Hurts have at this point? Do you think that he would be worth a first rounder? Would he be worth a second rounder? If you could talk a little bit about that as to what value he would have.
For sure. Yeah, it's a good question. First of all, I mean, to be clear, I wouldn't trade him. I don't think you can do that. I mean, I think there's so much value having a player who's shown potential like him on a rookie contract. And I'd be so reluctant, for him to have this success and then you just move on from him and then he's thriving somewhere else. And especially with Carson Wentz looking as bad he's been, and there's no guarantee that he rebounds. So I wouldn't do it, first of all. But yeah, it's a really interesting question to have when it comes to his trade value. I mean, there's so many quarterbacks who are projected, to go high in this year's draft. It's supposed to be a good quarterback draft. So I can't think, teams are giving up a first round pick when they could probably just draft their own guy and develop him, and have him for 4 years plus the 5th-year option on the contract, as opposed to Jalen Hurts. It's just on a 3-year deal at this point if you trade him after this season. So I think you could be kind of looking at a second or a third. I don't think you're getting a first for Jalen Hurts at this point, even if he has a strong finish to the end of the season.
J.A. Watts Eagles says, when guys leave Philly, they do better. Look at Aguilar, he's balling. Listen, and I hear you, Jay, but to me, he's balling right now for the moment. I think Nelson will become Nelson here very shortly. At least, for what's left. They got 2 games left as well, the Raiders. So right now he might be balling, but don't worry, Nelson will be Nelson come next season. So that one, I would agree, Jay. If he's doing well, he was doing well here, but then he had, of course, a lapse once again. But you just don't know. Nelson is just very up and down, unfortunately. David Sherman says Santa has not been back for 3 years. Serves us right for throwing snowballs at him in 1968. Ever grateful for the 1 Super Bowl victory. Eternally unforgettable. Happy holidays, guys. David, happy holidays and happy Hanukkah, of course, to David as well. And the rest of the, by the way, Brandon, just to let you know, the guy right there in the middle, right, Mr. Brady Bunch in the middle, the Jewru. So it's the Shermanators, the entire crew here, when they get together, between sports predictions, you name it, they're on point. So that's the older brother, correct?
That's correct. And just so you know, Brandon, before I became a contributor to the show, I said in the beginning of the year that the Eagles were going to end up at 4-12. And above me and below me were like, "No, you're crazy. Go back to episode 1 or right before the season when they both had after 8 games. Oh, I had the Eagles at 6-2. I have them at 7-1. I had them at 4-12 for the season." So that's obviously not going to happen with that tie against the Bengals. But, I saw very early on that there were some problems with this offensive line. And in my opinion, it all starts with the offensive line. No matter who your quarterback is, if you can't protect that player, they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, it's been an issue. It's heading into last week's game, this past week against the Cardinals, it was 13 different combinations in 14 games. It's like historically bad.
Sure is.
Oh,
go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say Carson Wentz being sacked about a league high 46 times. What do you want?
And this is the reason that I had brought up the question about, do you potentially trade Jalen Hurts so that you can get your own draft pick plus another draft pick and rebuild that offensive line quickly? Because who knows what's going to happen with Lane Johnson and the rest of the characters on this line. It's great that Jason Kelce is making a Pro Bowl this year. He might decide to hang it up after this year, and whether Hurts or Wentz is the starting quarterback on the team, you need to have protection on that line. Look at what the Dallas Cowboys did when they were 1-15. They built that offensive line. Look at what the St. Louis Rams did when they drafted Orlando Pace. They built that offensive line. And once your offensive line is strong, then good things start to happen for your fantasy football players.
Absolutely.
That's God's truth. Brandon, listen, we don't want to take up, obviously, the rest of your time. We know that you want to get together with the family. It's the holiday season. You might be traveling to the family. And by the way, everyone who's out there traveling, of course, spend the time with your family. Do as whatever they say over there on the left side. But just more than anything else, make sure you spend time with the family, friends, because we hope for everyone that 2021 will definitely be a lot better than what 20 was. And I see one more comment here coming in before we end this here. And someone tell me why in the hell did they bring back Deshaun? Dude gets hurt stretching. Yeah, well, it's what happens, right? Unfortunately. But for everyone else, of course, we will see you on Sunday. It's Dallas week, although it doesn't feel Dallas week. It did in the beginning of the season, but right now it's kind of like, ho-hum week. So it's not as big as a deal. So Sunday we will have on Brianna from Sports and Stilettos. Again, Brandon, we thank you so much for coming back onto the show. We really appreciate it, and we hope you have the best holidays as best you can possibly have it. Put it that way.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. So I appreciate it, and happy holidays, Merry Christmas, all that to you as well.
Too. Thank you. Thank you for coming on, Brandon.
Absolutely.
We do appreciate it, everyone. Thank you again for the comments. Happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas to everybody. We will see you all coming up this Sunday. See you then, folks.